Hydration.
Now, hydration is actually one of the easiest ones to plan. So for me, I have a 25-ounce water bottle here. And by the way, I have my race plan from Cloud Splitter still taped to it. So what I'll be doing at the end of all this is printing out that outlaw plan that I showed you all and taping that onto here instead. And then this right here is my waist belt that I put on. My water bottle goes in here. And then every time I want to check how long till the next aid station or how am I doing on cutoffs, that kind of thing, I just pull out my water bottle and I'm able to look at it. It's just that simple. Or I could just, if I'm pulling it out anyway for a sip, I could just double check and have that for easy reference. If you don't have a hard water bottle and you're using the flask like most people, you could just print out that paper, tape it up with like packaging tape to laminate it, and then you could have it in a vest pocket or something and still reference the pace chart as much as you need to. But anyway, back to water in itself. This race is not going to be extreme temperatures at all, right? And I know it also does not have big aid station gaps. Remember, first off, it's got all those gaps, the unmanned aid stations where there's the tables out in the woods with the water jugs. Those are like every few miles, so I don't need to be worrying about running out of water at all for this race. What you do want to do though is check that chart that we made, the aid station chart, and see if there are going to be any big gaps for your race. For me, if I'm getting more than like a 7 or 8 mile gap, then I like to start thinking about having an extra water bottle. So sometimes what I'll do, if it's just a matter of there's just one long aid station gap or 2 long aid station gaps, what I will do is I will just take an extra soft flask and I will drop bag it at the drop bag that I'm going to hit before there's a long aid station gap. So I've had that before where like the race wasn't too crazy hot, most of the aid stations weren't too crazy far apart, but then there was like one random like 13-mile gap. I know for me personally, I don't want to go 13 miles on just this one water bottle. That's something you should be testing out on your long run though. That's like an individual thing as far as how much water you require often. So you really want to be learning your body, or like, as Jess put it in our podcast, you want to be like a student of your body on those long runs and figuring out how much water you require. So for me, I know I am set for this race with just this one water bottle. The other thing to consider, if it's going to be crazy hot outside, not just big aid station gaps, but if it's a hotter race, then not just a small flask like this, I have like a whole extra bladder that I carried with me during Scout Mountain, for example, when it was record-breaking heat. It was in the 90s. I think the temperature was like 96 degrees with higher heat index than that. So then I'm going to carry extra water. So take a look at weather. Take a look at aid station gaps. That's going to be your big thing. And in the meantime, start learning how much you personally require.
So a quick summary here. It's generally recommended that you get 300 milliliters to 800 milliliters per hour during an ultra. That's roughly 10 fluid ounces to 27 fluid ounces. The big things to consider in your water planning, race specifically, are as follows. The weather, which includes temperature and humidity. Higher temperature, higher humidity means more water. Aid station gaps. And last, I forgot to mention the race's history and reputation. This isn't something that I would have thought to add on here until recently, but at Oregon Cascades, for example, the aid stations were up to 5 miles off of where they were supposed to be on the aid station chart. Meaning that I had planned for, let's say, a 5-mile gap or 6-mile gap between aid stations, and sometimes it would end up being a 10-mile gap or more. I was very frequently running out of water because of this. Also at Oregon Cascades, actually, there were times in the aid stations where even the volunteers did not know which jug contained Sword, an electrolyte drink, or which jug contained water. I was already having stomach issues when I asked for water at an aid station. I'd put Tailwind powder in my bottle already, expecting it to be mixed with water. The volunteer put Sword in the bottle. I did not realize this until after leaving the aid station, that I now had a super sugary, vomit-inducing drink made up of both Sword and tailwind, highly concentrated. It was pretty nasty. And guess what? It was several miles until the next aid station. So, race's history and reputation, if you're not sure if it's an inaugural year, like Oregon Cascades, for example, you may want to bring an extra flask with you. It would have been useful. It would have been very, very little extra weight for me to have kept an empty soft flask in my pack. And a few aid stations into that race, I would have realized, you know what, this aid station chart that I have is completely unreliable. I'm just going to carry this extra water. I am going to go ahead and fill it for the rest of the race. So that might be a good option to have as well.